Today is Friday, the 20th of August. The world keeps changing, a lot of things keep happening, and that is the reason we are here with our very dear friend, colleague, founder of this channel, Vijay Prashad, who is making a special effort to come to us from Santiago, Chile, even though he was very busy enjoying his life briefly for the first time with his children. I dragged him out of his family celebration so that he can impart some words of wisdom on a lot of things that are going on in our part of the world, which is the United States, affected deeply by what is going on in West Asia. If you like what we do, please hit the like, subscribe button, go to our Substack channel, same name, become a paid member. We will deliver this high quality news twice a week inside your mailbox. So, Vijay, please go ahead.
Well, today I think we should talk a little bit about the role of Pakistan in this entire ongoing, almost impossible war that the United States and Israel launched. I was reading this book called Regime Change by New York Times reporter Maggie Haberman and
Yes.
Jonathan Swan, and in the chapter called Plunder, there's a very interesting section on how Benjamin Netanyahu was invited into the Situation Room, where he gave a presentation to Trump and other people. And after the presentation, Netanyahu, as she writes, Maggie Haberman, a very, highly regarded reporter, she writes, Netanyahu delivered his presentation in a confident monotone. It sounded compelling and well prepared, at least to Trump. Sounds good to me, the president told the prime minister. To Netanyahu, this signaled a likely green light for a joint US Israeli operation. Everybody in the room apparently came away with the idea that this was going to happen, that the US and Israel were going to hit Iran. And what they said was, what Netanyahu told Trump was the risk of inaction was greater than the risk of action. Trump apparently was very impressed by the plan that Netanyahu laid out, which suggested to Mr. Trump it's an in and out war. Just go in, bomb the Iranians, and leave. So, Maggie Haberman's, this is a book published by Simon and Schuster in Britain, just highly credible account. Maggie Haberman has been with the New York Times many years. Her father was in the New York Times, a highly researched book. I'm reading it slowly, digesting the role of Stephen Miller in the Trump administration. But what struck me was this section on Iran. Obviously, that's of interest to you and I. It struck me because of the certainty that Mr. Trump took away from Netanyahu. Netanyahu is one of the few foreign leaders who's been allowed into the Situation Room. He went in there. He heard what the highest level of security briefings were. He gave his own briefing to Mr. Trump. So a foreign leader briefed the U.S. president in the most secure part of their establishment, and informed him that for sure if they do the following things, Iran would collapse. And what Mr. Netanyahu said is the protests in January, if a strike took place, if the supreme leader was killed, it would encourage people to rise up and the Iranian government would fall. Well, now we are in the end of August. It's been many months since February of 2026. The Iranian government, far from falling, seems strengthened. That is something that the Iranian president has been saying to his own people. He's been actually saying it publicly a number of times, that the Iranian government has to deal with the economic situation because the people are now with the government. And he says, we don't know how long they'll be with us if the economic situation continues to deteriorate. But that's the interesting part of it. Economic situation deteriorating, it's in fact not looking like it's deteriorating as much as it should, given that there's been such a long war. Well, one of the reasons it's not deteriorating is that Iran has been given a lease of life by Pakistan and its neighbors. Pakistan has opened at least 5 corridors, land corridors, for goods to go across the border from other parts of Asia as well, not just Pakistan, China, and so on, into Iran. And the Gwadar port, which the Pakistanis had built largely, in fact, to service their relations with China. China has always felt that, given that 70% of its oil came from the Straits of Malacca, that was considered one of China's choke points. China, wanting to go around the choke point, was very much eager to have some kind of port in the Indian Ocean side or in the Persian Gulf, and this joint venture at Gwadar in Baluchistan served that purpose. Well, now all these borders, these corridors into Iran, have allowed goods to go in and out of the country. Well, begs the question, doesn't it? If the United States thought, with Israeli pressure or Israeli quote unquote intelligence, that the Iranian government was going to collapse in a hurry, if the United States thought that, well, one reason they thought it might collapse, and in fact, Masoud Pezeshkian, the president of Iran, seemed to also feel that if the economic situation continues, people will get agitated. Well, the economic situation not deteriorating. One reason is these corridors coming in from Pakistan. Well, if the corridors are open from Pakistan, begs the question, why has the United States government not sanctioned Pakistan? There are opportunities to sanction Pakistan, throttle Pakistan. As it is, the US government does have a soft sanction on Pakistan, which is that Pakistan went back to the International Monetary Fund. We know that the International Monetary Fund answers to the US Treasury Department. We know that. So we know that, given that Pakistan has a very large a debt to the IMF and to creditors that provided Pakistan financing because of the IMF deal, we know that that gives the United States some fingers around the neck of Pakistan already. But there's no other sanctions. There's no OFAC sanctions. No sanctions that come through the US Treasury Department and the US State Department, that sanction companies, for instance, that are operating the trade across these land borders. Why haven't those been sanctioned? Interesting question. Why haven't individuals been sanctioned? Interesting question. In fact, even more interesting is, because of the nature of the Pakistani economy, there are a number of military backed companies that are participating in the trade with Iran. Trade is lucrative. These are big companies which have been part of the Pakistani economy for many years. They are participating. Why no sanction on them? And why does the United States continue to sell arms to the military and so on? Very good questions to ask. Yeah. But we have the answer to that. I mean, it's a straightforward answer. Pakistan currently is one of the few countries where there is trust between the various contending parties. That's one issue. The Iranian government highly trusts the Pakistanis. The US government trusts the Pakistanis. We know that Asim Munir and Mr. Trump have a very close relationship. Apparently, Mr. Trump called Mr. Munir my favorite field marshal. Yeah, that's interesting. So the relationship between Pakistan's establishment and the Iranian establishment very high, and so too with the US establishment and the Pakistani establishment. Now, Pakistan is not the only channel that the US has into Iran. The US has also been dealing with Oman. But again, recently, Mr. Trump made the rather callous statement that, if Oman continues to, maybe hinder US and US allied ships going through the Strait of Hormuz, the United States might bomb Oman. For our listeners, I just want to inform them that Oman, one of the more beautiful countries in the world, capital Muscat, is a country with a population of 5 million people. Yeah, less than most cities in the United States. 5 million people. I mean, it's a tiny country. For Mr. Trump to say that, I would bomb Oman is a rather unfortunate statement, frankly speaking. I mean, it's vulgar. A country of 300 some million people threatening a country of 5 million, which barely has, an army to defend itself, and has tried to, under the new emir, has sultan has very much tried to become the Switzerland of the Middle East. Wants to play that role. So there's a channel in Oman, but Trump has sort of put his finger into it. There's a channel in Qatar, but the Qatari emir is eager for the US to disband its base and leave. I don't know how much patience Mr. Trump has with the Qataris, although that channel remains open. And we know that the US government has made a channel through the Kurdish administration in northern Iraq. Mr. Barzani has been talking to the commander of the Revolutionary Guards in Iran. We know that that channel is open. It's been widely reported, but I think that's a channel just to check to see if the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guards, are on the same page as the political leadership in Iran. I think that's must be largely what it's about. So the only real channel the US has is Pakistan. Can't afford to burn Pakistan. At the same time, United States continues to play a duplicitous game with Pakistan. It's worried that Islamabad will get too close to Beijing, and so there's also that on the table. There's that desire not to push against Islamabad and push it into a closer relationship with Beijing and a direct relationship with Iran. Their relationship is so strong now; it could get even stronger. So the US is stuck, and so here's Mr. Trump, Zulfikar, and this is the key thing. Here's Mr. Trump getting a briefing from his friend Benjamin Netanyahu, who's telling him, it's an in and out easy war. We'll go in, we'll smash them, we'll destroy them, we'll win. They are stuck. And they are so stuck that the United States not only cannot conduct a regime change in Iran, but it cannot even discipline Pakistan, where there are in fact tools to discipline Pakistan available. It is not capable of that. This in total shows to me the absolute weakness of the United States right now in West Asia and South Asia. It is weak. It has all the tools available. It can bomb Lahore, it can bomb Karachi, it can bomb Muscat, it can bomb Tehran, it can do all these things, but it has no leverage. It has no leverage, and that's really that's the interesting moment we are living in.
Well, excellent summation as always, Vijay. You must have heard from our channel that Mr. Trump, in a very stupid way, tried to utilize this channel with the Iraqi Kurds, asking Barzani to approach Vahidi, General Vahidi, and offer him a few $1 billion in bribes. Whereupon Mr. General Vahidi told him, "Never, ever, ever come to me again like this, because you are asking me to commit treason." And he had done that previously with Asim Munir, and Asim Munir told him exact words: "You are out of your mind. I will never be invited back in Iran if I ever did something like that." So they appear to be flailing, Vijay. They
Mm.
appear to be. I mean, this is shocking to me, even in the light of what I have seen them do stupidly with Vietnam, with other places like Iraq, and this is the height. I mean, this is the height of stupidity, height of corruption of Mr. Trump, height of not knowing what he has to do. So, having tried to bribe General Vahidi, gotten thrown out on his ass, uh, having tried everything else, cannot really coerce Pakistan. I mean, can do a little bit of pressure, little bit of at arm twisting, but not real pressure. This is the sum and total of our reporting, and this is in fact what we believe is the case, and that is why they cannot really do very much. I mean, there are not five but six corridors open from Pakistan to Iran, through which a lot of Chinese materials go through, a lot of other materials go through, etc., etc. The relationship with Pakistan, Iran, has never been better. So, I mean, the end game, Vijay, what is the end game? I mean, we have to look at where do they go from here.
Well, first let's go back on onto the let's say the causus belli, the cause of war, which was the question of the nuclear weapons program that Iran was supposed to have. Okay, Iran has said repeatedly they don't have a nuclear weapons program; they only have a nuclear energy program. United States and Israel alleged that Israel, by the way, illegal nuclear power. All nuclear powers are illegal, but Israel more than others. At any rate, that was the cause of war. Let's look at that right now. I think it's important, and I want to go through this pretty systematically. The International Atomic Energy Agency, before this illegal war started, said that Iran had been able to enrich up to 60% of uranium at 440.9 kilograms. Okay. So theoretically, and when you check that out, it could produce several nuclear weapons if it enriched further. But there is no, nobody has said that there's a weapon available or that there is any warheads or warhead assemblies. There's no confirmed reporting from anybody, let alone the International Atomic Energy Agency and others who have been into Iran and done verifications. There's no current weapons design program. There's never been a nuclear test. We know that. In a sense, what this bombing run by the United States, Israel has done is it's in fact created more uncertainty for the West. Because whereas previously the Iranians basically gave the International Atomic Energy Agency almost everything they wanted. No country opens the door and says, come and have a look at everything, because the last thing you want is to allow them to see where everything is, because then it's open to attack. I mean, that is why there's hesitancy. They're not hiding anything, quote unquote, but they are, they don't have, why should they open everything and show you where it is, because they are basically putting a target on themselves. So they were effectively allowing the IAEA to verify and to inspect. Now they may not allow the inspectors to come in, and they may not allow them to verify, inspect things and so on. We don't even know what has been damaged, destroyed, where things have been dispersed. Satellite activity by itself around Isfahan hasn't been able to give any safeguard to the IAEA. IAEA statements have been extremely hedged. Steve Witkoff made, I think, a very dangerous statement when he talked about 11 bombs. Yeah, US envoy Steve Witkoff talked about 11 bombs. That's not from the International Atomic Energy Agency's formal assessment. It's very important that we say that. They've been talking about at the rate of enrichment, the Iranians have a 1 to 3 month breakout estimate, to nuclear weapons. These come from calculations done at the back of a napkin. There is no International Atomic Energy weaponization clock. It doesn't exist. These are not real figures and numbers. The US is just throwing this out, trying to, after the fact, ex parte, they are trying to justify an illegal war of aggression, which has failed. Trump initially said we destroyed the nuclear capacity. If you destroyed the capacity, then just fold it up, go back home. What are you continuing to do? Yeah. So obviously, the question of the cause of war, in other words, there's a nuclear weapons danger, etc., is nullified. There is no nuclear weapons danger. In fact, by going to war, you may have accelerated the danger. There's no danger. You said you destroyed everything. Then you said the danger continues. How can the danger continue if you destroyed everything? If the danger continues, your action has made it even more difficult to verify the danger. So we know that they are not interested in the nuclear question. That's not the real issue. The real issue is what the Israelis are after. And again, Haberman's book demonstrates that they want regime change. That's what they're after. This is a regime change war. Let's underline that. The United States Israeli illegal war of aggression against Iran is a war for regime change. That's what it is. This is not a war about nuclear weapons, about nuclear enrichment, and so on and so forth. Because the International Atomic Energy Agency hasn't even come near, saying that there's a weaponization clock. This war is just like the war against Iraq, which was prosecuted by George W. Bush and which Donald Trump criticized at the time, calling it a useless war. It's the same thing. That was a war for regime change based on a fallacy, a falsehood, not a fallacy, sorry, on a lie that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. There were none. There are no weapons of mass destruction in Iran. Yeah, the only difference between Iraq and Iran is in Iraq, the United States put ground troops there. Iraq could not defend itself. It had been weakened by a decade of sanctions. It had been truly a weakened country. It collapsed in the face of an enormous bombardment. Iran did not collapse. It is fighting back. It has taken the strategic advantage, and the US has not landed troops on the ground. Otherwise, it's just the same. It's a regime change war. Except here, unlike again in Iraq, the regime is not falling. The government is not collapsing. There are layers and layers of people in charge. It is not going anywhere. So Trump is genuinely stuck. You ask the question, what happens now? That question is a question of how will the United States exit? And I want to say something that our viewers may have neglected to pay attention to even in our conversation just now. The war begins because Mr. Netanyahu comes to the United States, makes a presentation, convinces Trump, and the US and Israel go to war. Israel has largely disappeared from this war. It doesn't have a role here. It's not negotiating with Iran. It's not a participant anymore. It's the United States that is paying the price for this. Yes, Iran struck Israel. That's true. But Israel is out of this. They slipped out of the back door. They left the United States carrying the parcel. Where is Iran? I mean, where is Israel in the de-acceleration in this war? It is not on the table. It's disappeared. This has become a US-Iran issue. Very interesting how they initiated, they dragged the US into this, and then they stepped out of the back door. They left Trump holding the parcel, and Trump has no exit. Because the only conceivable exit for Mr. Trump is a humiliating exit where he has to make a negotiation with Iran, where Iran wins a lot. Iran has, as we said last time, already changed the question. The question has changed from a nuclear weapons threat to the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. And if Iran has 6 egress points out of Pakistan, they can continue with this for a very long time. By the way, Iran has also other ports. It has the port of Charbahar, which it created with the Indians. That port is working. It's there. It's I mean, ships are coming in and out. So the United States can't isolate Iran that easily. Iran can continue, but this is a big problem for the US. Trump is standing there outside the White House, half of it under construction, holding a parcel called the Iran file, and he doesn't know where to put it down. He doesn't have a desk large enough in the White House to put that file down because that file is filled with confounding information that tells the United States intelligence people that you've lost the plot. The Pakistanis are not interested in what you're doing. The Turks are not interested. The Saudis are not interested. The Gulf Arab GCC countries turning their back on you. Iraq is not interested. The Iraqi prime minister goes to Washington, then he goes to Tehran. They're not interested in helping the United States. Yeah, we're going to be surprised in time seeing other countries turn their back to the US because of this giant file that Trump is holding and doesn't know where to put down, because the Iranians are refusing to surrender. And if their ultimate goal was regime change and they can't accomplish it, they don't have an exit. That's the problem. That's why I went through this long thing, Zulfikar, about the nuclear weapons issue, because we got to understand that if the real issue was nuclear weapons, then they could just pull out and say we destroyed their capacity. Then it's over, because Trump has already declared we destroyed their capacity. There is no weaponization clock any longer. Yeah, they could just walk away. We've damaged their facility. But they can't walk away, because the real purpose of this bombing run, this illegal war of aggression, was regime change. They've not accomplished it. Trump is a failure. He is what he hates being, a loser.
The world knows it. The only person doesn't know it is Trump. Everybody else knows about it. So Vijay, you're completely correct. Totally validated by facts. Pakistan is an interesting case over here, because Pakistan has all of a sudden become the center of gravity. No question about it. I mean, to deny that is just to deny reality. And Pakistan is not interested in towing Mr. Trump's line. I mean, that is our reporting, my reporting. And I have access to very significant places where decisions are being made in Pakistan, in Tehran, and I can say confidently they are not interested in towing Mr. Trump's line. A very big thing to say. In the previous, history, 10 years ago, that would not have been possible, but today it is possible. So Pakistan says no, Trump is incapable of squeezing Pakistan. I mean, that is really the reality. Trump cannot do it. By squeezing Pakistan, it loses the one opportunity he has for somebody to talk to Tehran. And he cannot afford to do that. Even somebody as congenitally stupid as he is, so stupid that maybe he's born that way, can grasp that point of view. That, listen, you cannot squeeze Pakistan any further. They're not willing to be squeezed. They're going to do what they are going to do. They have China at their back. So I mean, genuinely, I have to come back to you. You are a deep observer of global events for a long time. You have seen the Vietnam War. You have seen the Iraq War. I mean, all disasters. You've seen
Mhm.
the Afghan War. I mean, this is turning out to be a bigger disaster than all of them.
Yeah, I mean, this is a disaster, because, at least the United States could say with Iraq that they overthrew Saddam Hussein. They, in fact, engineered his execution and so on. They could walk away with that. They could say that, they left behind some sort of multi party democracy. They could at least say that. With Afghanistan, it's a little more complicated, because, well, the Taliban returned to power, they fled. Their Mr. Ghani, their last president, abandoned ship with, apparently, with tons of money. We don't know how much, sacks of cash,
Yeah.
dollars, were on his helicopter or plane. I've forgotten which, as he fled the country. Rather embarrassing for the United States. Afghanistan is going to remain an embarrassment for the United States for a very long time. It's even more embarrassing than Vietnam. It's going to be a long term embarrassment. They put a lot into it and they came out with nothing. This is embarrassing for different reasons. I mean, when Tucker Carlson has show after show where he's trying to make the argument that the United States went to war against Iran, an illegal war of aggression against Iran on behalf of Israel. Yeah, he's trying to establish that as a point. That is a very compelling argument. I mean, Haberman's reporting shows that it was Netanyahu who convinced Trump to go to war. That makes Tucker Carlson's point that, well, I don't know if Haberman is saying that the US went to war for for Israel against Iran, but at least she's making the argument it was at the urging of Israel, and Israel made a presentation saying it's going to be an easy war. So maybe the US had its own interests at play. Tucker Carlson is making the argument much deeper than that, that in fact it's not just that Israel egged the US into the war, but the US went to war against Iran against its own interests and on behalf of Israeli interests. That means there are no US interests here. That's Carlson's point. It's beyond Haberman. It's beyond her reporting. It's a very interesting point. Is that the case? Did the US go to war on behalf of Israel against its own interests? In fact, I think that's going a bit too far, because I think the United States has interests here, and its interests are to maintain its domination of the Gulf region. And it's actually been seeing its domination slipping. And that's the key part, that the domination was slipping in the Gulf region, not because of Iran, actually. The domination was slipping because the Gulf Arab states had started to turn towards China, seeing it as a more reliable trade commerce partner. The Gulf Arab states had decided that it was acceptable to start trading oil in renminbi or even in rubles if need be, had there been no intense sanctions on Russia, but at least in renminbi. That means that in time it could be possible that if the oil trade increasingly was denominated in renminbi, it could be possible that the euro dollar market might start to shrink. That in fact, if the Saudis and others begin to hold their oil wealth in currency other than dollars in the European banks and the European markets, and if the euro dollar market began to shrink, then the US capacity to run enormous deficits would be very greatly damaged. So, in a sense, the United States did have an interest to go back and dominate, the Gulf Arab states and so on. And had they succeeded in putting the Shah of Iran's son back in Tehran, they might have been able to bully the Gulf Arab states, including Saudi Arabia, to reconsider their actions. But because they failed, because the peacock throne is no longer has an occupant in Tehran, there is no Shah there. Yeah, there's a democracy in Iran. The Majlis is in control. Whatever you think about it, it's probably as good as the US presidential election, where there's an electoral college and all kinds of other arcane institutions that choose the president, including in 2000 the Supreme Court, men in black robes. Yeah, men in black robes laughing at other men in black robes is not a good look. Yeah, it's not a good look. So in that sense, the United States didn't succeed in Iran. It couldn't succeed in Iran. And so its bet to resecure dominion over the Gulf Arab states and against oil markets, to prevent oil markets from start denominating in renminbi or in other currencies. You see, the swift strike in Venezuela has brought Venezuela back into the dollar world. If they had succeeded in Iran and in the Gulf Arab states, they would have secured the dollar's ability to be the master currency for a very long period of time. This is seriously worrying the US administration. What happens when the dollar begins to lose some of its dominion in the world? The dollar Wall Street complex begins to lose a little of its hold on international wealth. What happens to the ability of the US government to run enormous deficits? What happens then? So this is I think, a quite legitimate worry in Washington and in New York. It's a legitimate worry, I think. So Tucker Carlson may be going a little far, saying that this war was entirely for Israeli interests. I don't think that's true. I think there are US interests also, but I think they backfired. That they didn't anticipate. They required, in other words, a regime change before this war could end. And since there's been no regime change, if they end this conflict and walk away, this is going to be extremely humiliating. And in our part of the world, there's nothing worse than humiliation. In our part of the world, nothing worse than that.
Losing face, losing face. That is. Well, I know a few things about the petrodollar regime. Not proud of having played a role in it, so I can sure 100% confirm that the collapse of the dollar regime, I mean, it may not happen tomorrow, it may not happen a year from tomorrow, it may not happen 3 months, 6 months from today, but it will definitely happen. I mean, I'm very certain it's going to happen. That is going to be the end of the US supremacy. No question about that. I do not know whether Trump is sophisticated enough to understand that. In fact, I would bet otherwise. I think he was mostly convinced by uh, Miriam Edelson's billions in bribes. That's a language he understands, and that's what he tried to do with Barzani. But that's the outcome of it. That's the outcome of it, and the outcome is that the U.S. hegemony, the petrodollar hegemony, is on its way out. Now, the things that concern me are the ham-handed way, the Keystone Cops way of sending Barzani with the promise of delivering billions to Vahidi. But it just makes me laugh. How stupid one has to be for even considering that. For somebody who's congenitally stupid like Trump, I mean, I believe he's congenitally stupid, born that way. And I mean, he has to understand that a nation that is as solidly behind their leadership as Iran, the offer of bribes would backfire, and that's exactly what has happened. Barzani has lost all contact, all credibility. He's not welcome anymore. This is my reporting. Thankfully, Asim Munir had more sense, and he said, "Get out of here! Don't talk to me about this." So Asim Munir can still visit Iran and so forth. Talk to everybody over there. But Trump is trapped, and I keep searching for what is his exit. Somebody like yourself, deeply immersed in world affairs, who's seen everything. If you cannot figure that out, I doubt if anybody else in Washington can figure that out. So where does this end, Vijay? I mean, finally, trying to put a fine point on this. Trump is trapped. Everybody knows he's trapped. He
Hmm.
cannot squeeze Pakistan. He cannot squeeze anybody. He's ham-handed way again, trying to bully Oman, and Obama told him, "Get lost." Literally, those are the words: "Get lost. Don't talk to us about this. You're going to bomb. Go ahead and bomb, and then see what it is we're going to do."
Hmm.
So he's got lost credibility there. Uh, Nobody listens to him anymore. Everybody thinks he's what he is, which we all already knew that carnival barker, just nonsense. So where does it go from here?
Yeah, I mean, look, frankly, the only thing, if I was sitting in the White House Situation Room and making a presentation to Donald Trump, the only silver lining for them, for the United States, is that it's not going to be very easy for Pakistan, Iran, and so on to sustain economically what they are doing, even within the context of the light touch fear of tertiary sanctions from the United States. I mean, firstly, the corridors that are there, the land corridors in particular, run through Baluchistan, and the highways that are there in Baluchistan, the N25 and N40, have seen over the last several months, attacks by various insurgent groups in Baluchistan. So, that's not an open road. The frontier core of the Pakistani military is trying to tighten things up there. But let's not say that there's no problems there. There are also problems in securing insurance for that. Between Pakistan and Iran, thus far, banking continues to be a pretty serious obstacle because there are no real commercial channels that are open. I've talked to people about that. Without comprehensive sanctions, there are still problems. I mean, there is correspondent bank scrutiny taking place, there's insurers' warnings taking place, there's delayed financing, tightening bonding rules. There are all kinds of problems that are there at the border. So we shouldn't also disregard the fact that it's not easy going. I mean, there are lots of Pakistani companies that are pretty, you know, let's say, afraid of getting involved with the trade with Iran because they worry about tertiary sanctions that hangs over companies if they are big enough. If they are just local Pakistani companies, the two truck walas, the ones who have two trucks at their disposal, they are okay about sending goods and services back and forth. Their main profit will be in the Pakistan Iran trade. But if we're talking about scaling this up and you get the bigger firms involved, they will worry about questions of insurance and so on. Similar questions as ships going through the Strait of Hormuz. There are questions about tertiary sanctions from the United States striking them. So there are lots of little vulnerabilities that are still there and that are impacting these countries. But let me say, these vulnerabilities, they are not enough to get these countries to sit down at the table and surrender. Okay, these are not surrender level vulnerabilities. I'm putting them on the table just in order to acknowledge that people shouldn't have some rosy eyed vision of what's happening, some increased trade between Pakistan and Iran. No, the situation is still complicated. Baluchistan is still contested territories, tough going for traders and for truck drivers and so on. About 100 trucks have been burnt this year on those roads, the N25 and 40. They're tough roads to go down. These insurgents know what they're doing, yeah. But this this problem faced by the trade uh, is not surrender level. Yeah, this is not going
Yes.
to lead Pakistan to urge Iran to surrender. This is
No
not
way.
surrender level problems. These are irritants that we should acknowledge and we should put on the table. Because interestingly, the flip side of these irritants is, if these trades become large enough, for instance, if Russian and Chinese goods and services are going through Pakistan and they are using transit facilities of Pakistani transportation companies, brokers, and so on, then maybe new facilities will be developed. In other words, new ways to reconcile payments, new ways to deal with insurance, that don't have the United States in play. Maybe there'll be new trucking companies created that are basically for the China to Iran route, that don't have any secondary large multinational corporation that might be afraid of tertiary or secondary sanctions from the US. So in fact, even this little problem I put on the table, Zulfikar, this problem might create, through the contradictions, new forms of economic activity that don't actually have a role with the United States. And that's, Marco Rubio, when he was a senator, once went on television in Miami, Florida, I believe, on a local television channel, and he said something very, very interesting. Because he was right what he said. He said, "Look, this whole de-dollarization thing is a problem, because if more and more countries stop being reliant on the dollar, then we don't have an instrument to punish them. In other words, if more and more countries start to trade without the United States fingers in the pie, then the US loses its ability to financially punish them, make the economy scream, deny them credit in dollars and so on. And they lose the ability, if they start trading in ways that the US insurance companies are not playing a role, they lose the ability to squeeze these companies, because they are not buying insurance from the West, or they are not involved in trades that rely upon Western circuits. That they have built circuits of trade that are independent of the Western circuits, and therefore sanctions mean nothing to them. If you sanction currently a trader in Kabul right now, today, if the US sanctions people in Afghanistan, it means nothing to them, because they are already outside the US circuits, completely outside. They are trading with the Central Asian countries, they trade with Russia, they trade with China, they trade with India, Pakistan. They don't need the United States. The sanctions make no sense. This is already happening in large parts of Central Asia. Central Asian banking systems are detached from the United States. This is happening in larger parts of West Asia than we recognize, including Turkey. Yeah, where for many years the Hulk Bank, State Bank, used to be in charge of Iranian oil reconciliation payments. India was paying Iran through Turkish banks. So lots of banking systems around that region are already detaching from the US system. They are not using the Swift system. We invented the Hawala method long before the Swift system. Hawala is the way in which Middle Eastern and Asian peoples transacted long distance trade and finance, and that was in the early modern period. So we know how to do long distance finance with trust long before and without the Swift system. Countries are returning to the Hawala system. What used to be for a time illegal is now becoming institutionalized. We are building new ways of financial transactions. This is also a problem for the United States. It weakens the US position. So here we go again. United States started a war of aggression against Iran, with emphasis from Israel saying this is going to be a quick in and out war. Turns out they are stuck. And the reason they came into this war, regime change in Tehran, in order to build US prestige and dominion amongst the neighboring countries, all of that has failed. So, how do they exit? They have to exit in shame. And that's difficult because Trump hates being a loser. They have to exit in shame. There is no glorious exit. There is no triumph for Mr. Trump. He is not going to be able to march through the streets of Tehran in triumph. It's not going to happen.
And when Pakistan made an opportunity available to him to exit with at least some dignity, he was stupid enough to have squandered that also, Vijay, as we all know. And and the final result, therefore, is that he's going to leave in ignominy. There's going to be an inglorious exit. It's a question of when. And I would hazard a guess that it would be in the coming weeks, because the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is not going to be lasting beyond that. Maybe maybe the middle of September, maybe the third week in September, and it will hit rock bottom. At which point, this extraordinarily stupid man sitting in the White House, unfortunate, corrupt Bulgarian, elected by the American people, for having created all this extraordinary chaos, would be leaving, this in ignominy, something that has not really happened. So, final words to you, Vijay. I mean, thank you so much for taking time out from your the great time that you are having with your dog, and that I just saw, and with your daughters, for lending your great voice. So honored to have you here. So, final word to you, and for everybody all across the globe who's listening to us. Thank you so much for your support. If you like what we do, please hit the like and subscribe button. Go to Substack, same name, Transition Protocol, for $5 a month. We will deliver this extraordinary, high quality news inside your mailbox twice a week. Vijay, the final word to you.
I just want to say that as I did on our last conversation together, that I send my greetings to the sailors on the USS Abraham Lincoln, now at sea for 266 days. They did conduct 10,000 sorties against the Iranian people, against civilians. They dropped about 1.5 million pounds of ordnance on the Iranian people, on civilians. Now they are suffering on that ship, but they are also human beings, and you and I humanitarians, so we are not cruel. We wish them well and hope that they will soon be on dry land. It is a telling sign that the United States has had to keep them out there, and is only now sending the George Washington to relieve the Abraham Lincoln. It's a telling sign of the weakness of the US military capacity, that it had to abuse its sailors so much. Far easier than abusing its own people would be to conduct a deal with the Iranians. I think all signs show that Trump, threatening to bomb Oman, of all places, and not willing to relieve their own soldiers who have been fighting so hard, treating them in this abysmal way. And we say this despite the fact that these same soldiers are responsible for killing Iranian civilians. This shows the absolute collapse of the US strategic imagination, but it also shows the moral collapse. And I very much hope that these sailors on the USS Abraham Lincoln, when they get back to the United States, go back home and tell their neighbors and friends about this moral collapse of the US establishment, and how there needs to be, a different way forward for the people. I very much hope that they become champions of peace, rather than symbols of war.
Well, Vijay, final note from me, even though I said that you will have a final, when you elect a corrupt, criminal Bulgarian, I mean, he's a criminal Bulgarian, he's been educated as such. The judge said that he has committed the equivalence of a rape. But what do you expect? The American people have no right to expect anything else.
Mm,
I hate to say that, being an American myself, loving this country, living in this country for the past 50 years, when the majority elects somebody as devoid of any decency as Trump, corrupt to the core, what can we expect? Nothing. And that is what we have seen. So until we meet again, folks, sorry to leave you on that unfortunate note, but we sometimes have to accept reality the way it is, and it is the way it is right now. Hopefully, soon, with the coming elections, we will find a little bit better people in Congress who can represent us, rather than just be, towing the line of Mr. Trump's because it feathers their nest. So goodbye. We shall see you again soon. Vijay will be back next week, unless there is something outstanding happens, and then we will request him again. Thank you, Vijay.
thanks a
Again,
lot.
thank you.